Okay, we're beginning chapter 15. From basically after we've seen at the end of chapter 14 that we have, in a sense, readjusted our goal more in concept than in practice, which is the oath is that you should be a tzaddik and not a rasha. So you think, well, that's it. That's the oath. You have no choice. That's what we are commanded to pursue, and that's what we're going to have to pursue. End of story. Well, as the Alter Rebbe has laid out for us, the idea of tzaddik, the way we initially understood it, which is basically a really good guy, a super duper good guy, the best guy you ever knew, is not really what the word tzaddik means. Tzaddik means they have completely silenced or even transformed their natural human instinct for self into the service of Hashem. And that is not purely the product of effort, meaning it is not innately within your hands to be able to achieve it. It is an aspiration, to be sure, and we are obligated to pursue it. Whether or not we can accomplish it may not be within our personal control. The concept of Beinoni, as we have now explained it, is the person who is in constant compliance with Hashem, if not in constant alliance with Hashem. So not only does that rhyme, but it helps us sort of frame this. It is about in conscious thought, spoken word, and deed, which is under our absolute control, has to be in perfect compliance with Hashem. To only want to be in absolute alliance with Hashem is not within our control. So I cannot control what I want, but I can control what I in fact do, and doing includes not only actions, spoken words, and conscious, deliberate thoughts, what I choose to sit and think about. Now, based on this, we may think, well, okay, it's a less than. It's kind of a resignation that you're never going to be a concert pianist, but maybe you can still play the piano at bar mitzvahs. You're never going to be a great artist, but maybe, people, you'll gift them some of your paintings and they'll like them and they'll even hang them up in their homes. Well, the Alter Rebbe wants to disabuse us of this misunderstanding. And so in this chapter, the Alter Rebbe lays out the demand that is placed on the Beinoni that can, and here's the sort of ultimate irony, from a certain perspective, exceed the status of a tzaddik. Now that seems bizarre because we are accustomed to thinking of it in a very linear fashion. Tzaddik, Beinoni, rasha. And now we're saying that the Beinoni can, from this perspective, be at a more profoundly aligned relationship with Hashem than even the tzaddik, which of course seems bizarre. So the Alter Rebbe introduces this with a quote from the book of Malachi, chapter 3, verse 18, if you want to write it down, and how it is analyzed in the Talmud, in the Gemara that is called Chagiga, on Daf Tes Amud Beis, which I'm now going to put on the screen here. Hopefully everybody can see it. I just want to get, okay. So the Gemara is in the middle of a series of discussions between Bar Heihei and Hillel. I hope everybody can see this on their screens. Now, Bar Heihei and Hillel share a somewhat similar background, which helps us understand this discussion between them. I'm going to come back and tell you what their background similarities are after we learn what it is that they are talking about. So Bar Heihei said to Hillel, you may recognize Bar Heihei, he's also quoted in Pirkei Avos. What is the meaning of that which it is written? And this is again that quote from Malachi 3:18. Then you shall again discern, and that is about a visual. And remember this idea, because in the oath that is administered to every neshama before it is born into this world, the whole world says that you are a tzaddik because that's what they see. So it's about what we can see, which is not always the same as is what is going on. We see the duck, it is perfectly still, and under the water, it's frantically paddling. So we see the Beinoni, he is in total compliance, but underneath the surface, he may be in significant conflict and not in alliance. Between the righteous, the tzaddik, here's the Hebrew, and the wicked, the rasha, okay, those are the terms, so tzaddik and rasha, between he who serves, and that's the crucial phrase, that it is current tense God, not who served God, but who is in the process of serving, very, very important, and he who does not serve him. There are two redundancies here. The righteous isn't the tzaddik, simply the one who serves God, and the wicked, the one who does not serve him. So what's going on? Why is it saying the same thing twice? Now, to in full clarity, that is not all that unusual. Sometimes in Tanakh, there is an emphasis by saying something repeatedly, and there's a little bit of a poetic character to it. The fact that Ben Hehe picks up on this and asks Hillel for an explanation means that other people didn't notice it because it's not so, I don't know if the word is, it's not so outstandingly odd that there should be this redundancy. It happens sometimes. So the question he's asking is, isn't this saying the same thing twice? You're saying there's a discernment between the righteous and the wicked, between one who serves God and one who doesn't serve him. Well, isn't that the same thing? Doesn't the righteous guy, isn't he synonymous with one who serves God? And the wicked is synonymous with one who serves him not. Hillel said to him, the one, he's here and back here, the one who serves him and the one who does not serve him are both referring to completely righteous people. Now that's bizarre, meaning, again, if you look here in the Hebrew, tzadike gemure, complete tzaddikim. So a person can be a tzaddik and still be termed one who serves him not, who does not serve God. But the verse is hinting at a distinction between them. As one who reviews his studies, and I'll explain the context of this, 100 times, is not comparable to one who reviews his studies 101 times. Okay? I just want to continue this, and then I'm going to come back and do some analysis. Okay? So the Gemara continues. This is the Rashi comment, just to play it out. The tzaddik is the one who serves God. That is, he who is a tzaddik and he who serves God, aren't they the same thing? And he says no, that the one who reviews his studies one time more than the other is incomparable. Even though they're both tzaddikim, they are not the same when he is serving God one time more. So just the Gemara continues, and we're going to come back to all of this. So I know it's a lot of information, but we'll come back. Bar Hehe said to him, and due to one extra time that he did not review, the verse calls him a person who does not serve him? He did it 100 times. He reviewed his studies 100 times, and he's called one who doesn't serve him? And if 1% more, he's called one who does serve him? That seems pretty harsh. He, which is Hillel, said to him, see where I am back here, he said to him, yes, go and learn from the market of donkey drivers. One can hire a driver to travel up to 10 parasangs for 1 dinar. However, he will travel 11 parasangs only for 2 dinars. So 10% more work, 100% more pay. This shows that any departure beyond the norm, and this is the crucial line, any departure beyond the norm is considered a significant difference. So a whole lot of stuff going on here. So I want to introduce this by backing up for a moment and sharing a little bit about the history of both Hillel and Ben Hehe, Bar Hehe. Hillel, as many people are familiar, was a man who came from abject poverty. And in fact, the whole concept that we have scholarships to enable people to study Torah is learned from an incident with Hillel, that he didn't have the fee to pay entry into the Beis Medrash. And so he climbed up on the roof and he listened in, but it was snowing and he fell asleep in the snow and they found him half dead and they revived him and they said, this is wrong. A person wants to learn Torah. If he doesn't have the money, he should not be denied. And Hillel would go around collecting up firewood to sell for a few pennies and so on. So Hillel demonstrated a tremendous level of passion to study Torah. In fact, the Talmud says that no poor person could ever claim that they are exempt from Torah study because of their poverty, because no one was poorer than Hillel, and yet Hillel studied Torah. Now, Bar Hehe, what is his life story? So the Tosfos commentary, which is right here, if you want to see it in the original Hebrew, tells us that Bar-Hei was not his name. His name means the son of the letter Hey. And Tosfos tells us that he was a convert. Why is he called the son of the letters Hey? Because who is the parents of all converts? Abraham and Sarah. And what were their original names? Of course, Avram and Sarai. And they had the letter Hey added to their name. So he is the descendant of the letters Hey, of the two people, Abraham and Sarai, who became Abraham, and Sarah, who had the letters Hey attached to their name. Now, the reason why I bring this up is not just the curiosity about his name. It teaches us about why these two individuals would particularly be, I don't know if the word is fond or demonstrative or clarifying of this idea. Because look at the extraordinary effort which they made. So since we are emphasizing the effort to go beyond the norm, to go beyond the standard, so who has gone beyond the standard more than Hillel, who came from such abject poverty, and Bar-Hei, who went through a total conversion? They certainly, I like to call it, outpaced the inevitable. They certainly did more than the escalator trajectory of where they would go. And this is the role, of, as we will emphasize in this chapter, as to how the Beinoni can exceed the Tzaddik. So, till now, based on what we learned in the last couple of chapters, we may have seen this as a sort of concession. Oh, well, I'm never going to be a tzaddik. I should aspire to it and work towards it, but it's not going to happen. As I mentioned before, it's not going to happen. And now the Alter Rebbe is telling us not only a placate, oh, well, don't feel bad, nobody's perfect, blah, 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 something even more profound, that we may never be tzaddik, we can exceed the tzaddik when we go beyond the norm. Now, remember, the original example that Hillel gave was about the person who reviews his studies 101 times. A little background. When oral Torah was in fact still oral, how did they ensure that it was passed on from teacher to student? They reviewed it time and time again. Remember, there was no authoritative text. Of course, a person could have a private notebook. How did you make sure that he knew it? You drilled it into his head time and time and time again. How many times did they commonly do it? 100 times. So 100 became the standard. 101 goes beyond the standard. Curiously, and this may be a little bit of a stretch, but maybe it'll add some depth to it, Hillel is the one who emphasized that, again, when we find in Torah that there is a lesson that is taught, Pirkei Avos is the best example of this, where there is no dispute about this lesson. It's not like there's two different opinions. We often ask, well, why is it attributed to this particular author? And we explain that there must have been something about his life that made this particularly relevant to him and particularly meaningful that he said it. So if the poor guy says, well, money's not important, you think, well, you don't have any money, so what do you know? But when the rich guy says it, you think, well, he's got money and he's saying it, so maybe he has some authority. Well, Hillel is one of the great illustrators of a rule called, in two Hebrew words, we just had it into Parsha 2 weeks ago, Dai Machseru. Dai Machseru is a law in the rules of tzedakah that how much tzedakah is a person entitled to reinstate them to their previous stature. Now, we're all familiar with terrible stories of abuse and lying, but if you think about it, in our world, would we say indoor plumbing is a necessity? Of course. Well, you think the pharaohs had indoor plumbing? You think the King of England in the 1780s had indoor plumbing? Of course not. But it's become the standard. We can't live without it. Cell phone. We would say that's a necessity. More than one pair of clothing is a necessity. And Hillel is one of the great teachers of this idea. And the most profound or the most extreme illustration is a man who was very wealthy and very prominent and sadly lost his wealth. And one of the things that this man was accustomed to was the announcement of his arrival. And now he had lost that. And Hillel reinstated it. Now, what this teaches us is that Hillel only reinstated him to his level, not beyond. And this becomes the guiding rule that Hillel is right in the center of this discussion. But again, not only Hillel, and the fact that Hillel is so central to it, again, perhaps sheds some light onto this idea that there's a certain standard that a person lives to, and you got to reinstate him. But beyond that is where wealth is. So in the laws of tzedakah, you're not obligated to give the guy beyond. But what we see here is once something becomes a standard, in a certain sense, I'm not impressed anymore. When a 2-year-old learns to walk, or a 1-year-old learns to walk, we're all very excited and impressed. When he's 15, we're not that impressed anymore. But I used to not be able to. Okay, but now you are. When you're driving from California to Florida, and you wake up in Oklahoma, you say, wow, that was a lot of driving. The next morning, we can't talk about it now. Don't tell me about what you did yesterday. Tell me what you're going to do now. That's what it truly means to go beyond the norm. And going beyond the norm, as we see, even if you're only going beyond the norm 1%, from 100 to 101, that is the changing point. So what is it that we expect from the Beinoni? Perfection? Yeah, that we know already. Total compliance. But you might think, well, I'm in compliance, but not a lion, so, oh, well, best I could do. No, the point is, how much are you ahead of where you were yesterday? And then the follow-up, when Ben Hey quotes the story about the donkey drivers, here it's a 10% increase. They used to go 10 miles for $1. Now they're going 11 miles and 100% increase in the consequence from one coin to 2 coins. So we got a 1% and we got a 10% that gets you 100% reward or consequence or activity or benefit that transforms everything about what you have done. So again, Ben Hey and Hillel are particularly life experienced to make this meaningful and special because of their journey. Ben Hey being the ger and Hillel being the man of such abject poverty, he could have very easily given up on the whole thing and said, how can you expect me to learn Torah? I can't even pay the few pennies to enter. He's collecting up sticks and so on. And the idea that what a person has become accustomed to is considered standard, which again, in the laws of tzedakah, but what it means, it's like, as we might say, maybe a little callously, I'm not impressed. But I used to not. Yeah, but that was yesterday or 2 years ago. I mean, at some point, you got to keep growing. And again, the person who's still living, back in high school, I could, or 3 years ago, okay, what have you done for me lately? That's more. Yes, you're still doing it, but it has always got to be continuous growth. I mean, we know this now even more and more, even physiologically, use it or lose it and so on. And don't resign yourself to being incapable and so on. And again, how much more are we asking? 1% more. That's what we're asking, just 1% from 100 to 101. We're just asking for 1%. And this brings the Beinoni to be superior to the tzaddik. So again, whereas we might have interpreted Tanya saying, okay, it's sort of a feel good for mediocrity, we see that it is an extra level of demand that's not only demanding, but can exceed the status of the tzaddik. Not that it's a competition, but it can exceed the status of the tzaddik. Now, this quote, again, from Malachi, which is analyzed in the Gemara that we talked about, is going to be the basis of this chapter. So here we go in chapter 15. Ubezeh. Again, remember, whenever we begin a chapter, we look that it begins with the letter Vav, which suggests that it's a continuation. And that continuation is for the end of the previous chapter, where the Alter Rebbe told the Beinoni that even though tzaddik is a gift, and it's not purely within your control whether or not you will achieve tzaddik, although you are demanded to be in endless pursuit thereof, right? We may recognize from Pirkei Avos that it's not incumbent upon you to complete the job, but you are not free to desist therefrom. So the Alter Rebbe in the previous chapter said, you keep at it and you never know what will happen. First of all, you're outpaced the inevitable. Second of all, you get better at it. Who would have believed that I could ever learn to fill in the blank, daven, and so on? It seemed absolutely impossible, so overwhelming. We're in the beginning of the school year, and the kid sits down and they start taking French or Chumash or calculus, and like, forget it, I could never do this. I tell them, well, in a year. Well, I'm 8 years old. A year is so far off, it's almost an impossible imagination. But as we know, as a little more life experience, you get to the end of the year. And when you get to the end of the year, hey, guess what? I can read, I can daven, I can do algebra, whatever it is. There is a capacity to get beyond myself that we never would have imagined. So now we can understand this statement in Malachi. V'shavtem v're'isem. You should go and you should analyze. Bein tzaddik l'rasha. The difference between a tzaddik and a rasha. Now again, tzaddik and rasha, as we have defined them, are not super nice guys and horrible, evil murderers. It means somebody who's in total alliance with Hashem and somebody who's not always in total compliance with Hashem. Remember, the Beinoni is compliant, if not alliant. Bein oived Elokim, and this is crucial, one who serves. It is the current tense of that verb that is crucial. It's not just one who has served Hashem or who will. He is in the constant process. Lasher loy ovdu, to the one who was not serving. Now, curiously, the word oived, avoida, eved, all these terms are based on the same root word. The most profound illustration of this idea is leather tanning, meaning if you see a cow and you see a pair of leather shoes and you think, how in the world did this become this? Meaning it's not going to happen by itself. Now that is true, of planting. To imagine what it means, hamotzi lechem in haaretz, to take the seed and put, and all of that process. So again, ultimately, I guess we'd like to see this in everything. But if I see a child who's 8, I can imagine he'll be 9. That seems to happen inevitably. I know it's more difficult than that, as we all understand, etc. But you could sort of imagine that. I call it the escalator. You could see it. It's going to go up, right? It's difficult and challenging, but you get on the bottom floor and you go up the escalator. That's how it goes. But when we're talking about the cow skin becoming the soft leather that you make shoes and belts, you can't imagine how in the world is that going to happen. And it's not going to happen inevitably. That's the point. It's not going to happen unless there's true, intense labor that is invested. And that's essentially what we are describing here. It's not just about compliance. So, is it possible that tomorrow this person will go and eat cheese? Of course it's possible, but it's not really possible. Is it possible that this child will not graduate 4th grade? Of course it's possible, but that's the escalator. The escalator is the kid in 3rd grade becomes a kid in 4th grade, becomes a kid in 5th grade. They make movies about the kid who doesn't, but that's the trajectory. The trajectory is they move along. That's not, quote, impressive. Even Hanukkah, which is one of the great illustrations of this idea that we have to continuously add, it's still a process. The first night you light 1, 2, 3, which is great. Again, we're not against it, but that's not enough. We want to outpace the inevitable. And that's what avoida is. And again, using that illustration of the cow skin being turned into the soft leather that we make shoes from is the intense character of labor that we are looking to achieve in our own identity. So a person starts off, fill in the blank, whatever the characteristic is. They're lazy, they're harsh, they're rude, they're stingy, whatever it may be. And they learn that they're supposed to be patient and generous and kind and flexible. So they make a conscious decision. I am going to be kind. Hello, they're making an effort. They make an effort, they make an effort. Guess what? Then they become a kind person. So the animal soul says, you did it. You're a kind person. So you could take the rest of the day off. But our message is yesterday's accomplishment is today's starting point. What have you done to outpace where you started? And again, just say, well, I keep growing. It can't just be on this smooth trajectory. Yes, we all know it could be worse and this guy, but it's not a competition. And we're not learning Tanya just for, well, it's better than nothing. Okay, we understand. But for that, the Alter Rebbe did not have to write Tanya for, well, it's better than what that guy's doing. It's supposed to be about this endless pursuit, avoida. And again, as I mentioned, avoida means transforming our character from its natural proclivity to something you could never otherwise imagine, like looking at the cow and imagining that becomes again shoe and so on. Okay,
Rabbi Epstein?
yes,
Oh, wait, can you hear me?
yes,
Sorry.
yes, I hear
Oh,
you.
I was just connecting it to what you were saying yesterday in Shul about the Rebbe, about like pushing to do more and more.
Thank you. Someone was listening. Thank you
I
so
wasn't.
much. Appreciate, right? Exactly. It's this again. You know, it's funny because hopefully we're not so greedy, but we understand in the material that a guy wants more. But we want to be that way, as we say, who is wealthy, he who is happy with what he has is for material things. But the idea that if a person has 100, they want 200, that's how we should be in spiritual things. Sometimes it's the opposite. People only think about, well, that guy has it better than I have. And what about spiritual? Oh, well, that guy doesn't even do what I do. So we got to turn that upside down. And in material things, we want to look at people who have less. And in spiritual things, we want to look at people who have more. We want to have more character and less material. Okay. So here the Alter Rebbe says, what is the difference? Remember, the Gemara asked the question that we studied. What is the difference between one who serves God and a tzaddik? Isn't that the same thing? Isn't a tzaddik one who serves God? This is the key term. The word oved, serves, means he is in the midst of serving. It is a current tense term. He is in the process of doing it. It is not something that he's done. No resting on your past accomplishments. There's an old saying, breakfast never solved anything because a few hours later, you got to eat lunch. So it's not like, well, what do I got to do? And you won't bother me anymore. We're coming up to Yontif time, and sometimes there could be a mentality that I show up for Rosh Hashanah and I keep my mouth shut and I behave and I'm a good boy and I keep my nose in the book and I behave all the way to Yom Kippur and I fast and I'm patient and I'm tolerant and on Rosh Hashanah we are written and in Yom Kippur we are sealed. See you next year. That's it. Like, what do I got to do? And you're going to basically give me what I want and leave me alone. Well, this is the message of Tanya. Whatever you do becomes reason why we expect more from you. Now, that may feel very oppressive, well, because the animal soul's greatest aspiration is inactivity. We've all been to the zoo, right? What does the animal do all day? Nothing. And he's perfectly content to sit in the cage and do nothing. He gets fed, he gets whatever he needs, and he just sits there all day in the sun for, endless hours. That's what the animal soul within us wants to do. In other words, what's the least amount I got to do and I won't get yelled at? What's the least amount I got to do and I'll get what I want? Well, the godly soul, being godly and infinite, is endlessly in pursuit of upending that laziness or that satisfaction. I would say we learn from the Rebbe, always happy, never satisfied. Whatever you do, do more. People come to the Rebbe, I built 2 yeshivas. Good, build 2 more. Now, that's not an insult. Because if somebody said, Rebbe, I made $1 million last year, so I hope you make 2 million next year, no one's going to say, why, $1 million not good enough? Everybody would be happy to have that bracha. So this is that message that Tanya is imposing upon us. And again, the kicker is this is a higher level than the tzaddik. We thought that we're getting a break, that the Alter Rebbe is letting us off the hook um, from being tzaddik. Oh, I don't have to be tzaddik because you can't be tzaddik anyway, and it's for gifted people. They can do it and not me. No, the Alter Rebbe is saying you can be a level that is superior to the tzaddik if you are oived Elokim. Don't tell me about what you're doing. Tell me about what you're doing that is more than what you did yesterday. That's the difference. And that's why, again, as we see it, people making their process in their Yiddishkeit, which we hope to be everybody does. They say, well, those people, they have to do tshuva. And you don't have to do tshuva. Everybody has to be in endless pursuit thereof. So the Alter Rebbe continues, meaning Shuba Emsa Avodah. He is in the middle of his Avodah. There's a song, it's in Russian and translated into English, what are you doing in the market? And people can be busy all day and never really accomplish anything. There are jobs and jobs like that where people are pushing a pencil round and round and nothing ever gets accomplished. What are you doing there? We're not there to buy and sell. We're there to make a profit. Well, we're not here just to sort of keep ourselves busy. We're here to be making a spiritual profit. Shehi hamilchama im hayetzahara. That is the battle with the Yetzirah. We are engaged in the battle. And when we are engaged in the battle, we are being in the transformative service. Let's think of it that way. The word service means to transform, not just to transform my behavior, which is sort of the quote obvious part, that's the Beinoni, compliance. We're even transforming our alliance because it's not a binary yes, no. Do you love Hashem? Well, why do you? Because that's how we are, right? Everybody wants to be healthy. Why do you eat potato chips? Because in the moment I wanted potato chips. Everybody wants to be the first. Why you oversleep? Because at that moment I was tired. The question isn't yes, no. The question is in the moment. Sometimes we talk about the end of days. Tanya's talking about the day by day, and not just about in the end. Am I going to go to heaven? Am I good? Am I going to win? I just want to know that I'm good. I just want to know that I'm safe. I just want to know that I'm settled. And we're not against any of those things. Those aren't bad things. We have to be cautious that they not be hijacked by the animal soul to say, well, in that case, you might as well just take a chill. Because, hey, who cares? You might as well just, relax about it. Well, that's what we want to fend off. We want to fend off this sense of sitting on the couch. That's what we want to fend off. We want to be eagerly, actively, passionately engaged in every moment. That's what we want. Okay. So
Rabbi Epstein? Oh,
yes,
sorry.
yes. No, sorry.
So sorry, I'm just making all these connections, but because yesterday when
that's
we
something to be sorry for.
When for your wife's class, in the women's class, so we were talking about like everything is either like you're something that's sorry, Scooby, something that's holy or it's not holy. Everything that we do is it's so daunting, like to figure out like how do you do that?
It's very daunting to our animal soul. And look, the way we, in the West, in America, are conditioned, it's the basic thing, classic message, what do you want more than anything else? And I figured out how to get it. And basically what people have realized that they want is, just to do nothing. And they're perfectly content to sit on the couch and just, veg out. The classic thing. The kid comes home and his father says, do your homework. You can't, I don't know, sit on the couch. Well, you're sitting on the couch. Well, I already have a job. Don't you want to have a job? Well, why do I need a job? Well, then you're not going to live here. You have to have a place to live. And then what? Well, then you have a job so you can sit around and do nothing. So what's the ultimate objective is work hard so you can have stuff, so you can sit on the couch and do nothing. So the animal soul, like I said, like no different than the lion in the cage, he's perfectly content. He's not unhappy. He's not thinking about, what is the meaning and purpose of my existence and what have I contributed to the world and how is the world a better, different place because I've been here. He's just a lion. He's just thinking about lunch and he knows he's going to get lunch. Look, it happened to the Jews. In Torah, it's a constant thing. Noah doesn't want to leave the ark. Who wants to leave the ark? It's hard out there. Who wants to leave Sinai? and go out into the wilderness? Who wants to leave the wilderness where manna rains from heaven? So if our objective is, just to even be personally engaged, then sure, who wants to go out into the world? It's hard out there. But our message is, Dir b'tachtein, make this world with all of its resistance into a place that's welcoming of Hashem. To say, hey, God is welcome here. And that's not going to happen inevitably. That's going to take effort on our part. We are going to have to work the world so that it can become a place where godliness is welcomed. And that's the effort of the Oved, which can be greater than the Tzaddik. Look, to take it at a very simple Chabad level that we're all familiar with. There is certainly a perspective in the world of Torah that the greatest aspiration is to be able to essentially pull my talus over my head and ensconce myself in the place of holiness and study Torah, or in a sense, be in alliance with Hashem all day and night. And there's this great beauty to that. I'm not diminishing it. The greatest aspiration in the message of Chassidus is, I'm going to go to a place that is naturally very belligerent and resistant to godliness, and I'm going to bring godliness there. Perhaps the most profound illustration of this is the Rebbe's message to the prison chaplains, that you come to the prisoner and say, you are in such a dark place. That must mean that you have such a tremendous light that you can bring light in such a dark place. So this is the ultimate objective. How much can we transform? Now, again, there's a certain comfort to slipping into my little cocoon. And again, it's not a yay or nay. It's not all or nothing. And the message the Alter Rebbe is saying here is, our mission is to go out and transform the world beyond its escalator, inevitable change. And again, that's what we're searching for. And in that way, the Beinoni can be more profoundly in alliance with Hashem than the Tzaddik, because of the challenge of overcoming his proclivities. And again, it's not like, well, you get to Tzaddik, you're done, like in the board game, you get into base and that's it. Now your game is over. That's not our mission. The Tzaddik is also an never-ending pursuit of transformation of himself, of others. The greatest tzaddik is the one who empowers others, like we always talk about with Moshe Rabbeinu. His greatest accomplishment is not what he does, but what he gets the people to do. So here the Alter Rebbe continues. What is it he's trying to do? Hiskaber olav, to overpower him. And we know this physically. The way to get physically stronger is to work with something that is outside of your ability. So if you're able to lift 15 pounds and you lift 15 pounds every day, you won't get weaker, which is good, but you won't get any stronger. The only way to get stronger is to lift 20 pounds. But I can't lift 20 pounds. I can't lift 20 pounds. Hey, guess what? I can lift 20 pounds. Great. Hey, I'm on 20 pounds. Now I got to go to 25. What do you mean? I used to only be able to do 15. Now I can do 20. That's great for yesterday. Today is not enough. And it's not just got to be 15, 20. It's got to be 2, 4, 6 purple. It's got to be unexpected. It can't just be, again, on the trajectory. Even the story of Hanukkah, like the Rebbe talks about what happens when Hanukkah is over. Now we have to grow unexpectedly. We need that boost. We need 1, 2, 6, 7, 8. Tomorrow, we can't rely on 9 candles. Now we have to bring the light to the world without the benefit of the candles. We have to do that on our own. That's pretty tough stuff, right? It's very demanding. And again, as we've talked about from the very beginning, if my greatest aspiration in life is to just make sure I'm going to go to heaven, Tanya's not going to be so much fun because it's hard. It's very demanding. It is. It's very, very demanding. And it's one of the things that was difficult for many people. What do you mean? I just want to sit and learn Torah all day, which is not a bad thing. It's a beautiful thing. I'm not diminishing it. But is it avodah? Is it doing what is not in your natural trajectory? Okay, so here the Alter Rebbe continues. What is the objective? Lagarshe, to dismiss it, mi'ir katana, from the small city. Now, you remember the small city is an analogy that we got from King Solomon, that just like two kings are battling for control of a city, and they want everything in the city. They want all the will of the people. They want all the natural resources, etc. Similarly, we have two kings. the animal soul and the godly soul, and they are in absolute, mutually exclusive pursuit of total dominion over the person. They want all their conscious thoughts, all their spoken words, all their behaviors. They want every aspect of their existence. They want the entirety. And the Beinoni struggles. And what is he struggling to do? Again, to dismiss the animal soul. Now, again, even though, as we mentioned, that that's really the purview of the tzaddik, again, as we've learned this over the years, it does get easier. There is a possibility that we can, even though it seems like, well, we're just forever destined to always be fighting that desire for fill in the blank, whether it's laziness or cheeseburgers or whatever it may be. It does get easier. And again, as we learned in the previous chapter, the Alter Rebbe demands that we go through exercises to make those temptations more and more repulsive. As we mentioned, where does every indulgence wind up after it's been indulged? Nobody says, "Oh boy, am I glad I ate that extra piece of chocolate cake." No, it's the sign of their weakness. Boy, am I glad that I overslept and didn't go to no, they're just ashamed, or they justify it or whatever, but they're not proud. That's my proudest accomplishment, is how I got away with something criminal. I mean, unless the guy's a sociopath, which could be, and I'm not dismissing that that's a possibility, but for that guy, he needs something much more than Tanya to get his life in order, right? He's not going to get his life in order from learning Tanya if he enjoys being completely self-absorbed. And again, I'm illustrating it in the extreme, but if you think about Western culture, they sort of celebrate that, right? That's their greatest thing. What is it that you have done? How have you gotten something from somebody else? Again, we have our own problems, but if a person is boasting that they built 3 yeshivas, that's certainly a lot better than they're boasting that they bought 4 Rolls Royces. They may both be boastful, but at least that, it's a lot better than boasting about, their wastefulness and so. Okay, so here we continue. What is the Beinoni's struggle? And again, we have said before, struggle is not failure. Now we might say struggle is the greatest sign of service. It's the sign that I am in service of Hashem because I am struggling. Now, we don't got to go make up struggles because life itself will present enough struggles. You don't have to go artificially creating them, to be sure. Simultaneously, when a person finds themselves struggling, rather than thinking, well, I must be a failure because I'm still struggling, we might say, well, this is the greatest opportunity. This is the opportunity for you. There's a story told, maybe it's even a true story, about the person who wanted to marry this non-Jewish woman, and everybody tried to talk him out of it, 9 ways to Sunday. He finally was convinced, he'll sort of do his grandmother a favor to go talk with the Rebbe. And the Rebbe said, I'm jealous of you. He said, Rebbe, she's not that great. He said, no, because you have a temptation, that means you have the capacity to overcome it. So again, there is a tendency to say, well, it's easy for you. You don't like those things. Well, if I do like those things, we believe that God knows what he's doing and he doesn't give us a challenge we can't handle. So what is it that the Beinoni is after? Is to prevent the investiture, that is the capture of any one of his characteristics of the city by the enemy. We have this all the time. Unfortunately, we've learned it, right? We are in constant vigilant mode. I mean, why do we have Border Patrol at Canada? They're so nice in Canada. Because if we don't for a minute, right? Why do we have prison guards? There hasn't been a prison break in 30 years. Let's send the guards home for a day. Just one day. Think about how much we'll save. Obviously, if you let your guard down, the prisoners escape. And that's the constant vigilance that we need to be on. We need to be constantly aware. Shehu be'emes avoida v'amo gadol hilachim b'tomid b'hainu abeni. Let's really celebrate this line. Look what the Alter Rebbe says. Now, I can just tell you from my own life experience that this is one of those great lines, or I don't know what the word is, not for me to compliment or not, one of the profound lines of all of Tanya. Look what the Alter Rebbe says here. This, the Alter Rebbe is not describing as an instruction. This, the Alter Rebbe is not giving you a task. He is simply being in awe. Read this line again. The Alter Rebbe says it is truthfully, and truthfully means not as opposed to a lie, but it means it's true under all circumstances. It also probably means it's always going to be that way. An avoida, a real labor, a tremendous effort to battle constantly, and that's the Beinoni. So the Alter Rebbe is acknowledging this is really, really hard. And it's constant. It's unending. Now, historically, what were people told when they came to their teacher and they confided that they're struggling? So the teacher, who of course doesn't struggle because he's the tzaddik and he does it professionally, is like incredulous. What do you mean? You're not allowed to do that. What do you mean? You're bad. That's why. Because you're bad. If you would be good, then you wouldn't struggle with this. You need to study more. Here's a book. Here's a 500-page book in Hebrew about why you shouldn't do that. That'll work. Right. It worked for me. I can do it. All right. You like it. You're the tzaddik. You're the one who enjoys it. I don't. So here the Alter Rebbe, in as we would say in our modern lingo, has empathy. And he says, you're right. This is really, really hard. And it's a constant, really, really hard thing to do. That's what it means to be a Beinoni. So you thought Beinoni was like, okay, look, I'm never going to be a tzaddik. I know I swore to be a tzaddik, but maybe, it's not fair, and I didn't mean it, and what do you mean swore, and what do you mean tzaddik, and what do you mean? And so I'll be a Beinoni, okay, So the Alter Rebbe says, it's really, really hard to be a Beinoni. I mean, it's so super duper hard. And again, later in chapter 19, the Alter Rebbe says, Halavai Beinoni. I wish. I don't really even expect you to be a Beinoni, but don't tell anybody I said that. So this line where the Alter Rebbe says that this is truly service, which is in one sense, that's the bonus. Like that is a real service. You think it's not. You think the fact that you're struggling with fill in the blank means you're a bad person. Because if I'm a good person, I wouldn't struggle with it. They don't look at McDonald's. Why am I looking? They don't struggle. They're generous. They daven. They get up on time. They're friendly. They're welcoming. I don't, because I'm a bad person. No, this is what it means to do avodah. What does it mean to serve Hashem? That's what it means. And it's really hard. I must be a bad, why is it so hard for me? Right? I'm acknowledging that it's truly very, very difficult. Rather than reprimanding you, I'm telling you, I agree. It's super hard. It's really hard. I agree. It's really, really hard. You're right. I absolutely agree with you. It's really, really hard. Right? And now we're going to go and pursue it. So again, what do you usually get? You get impatience. What do you mean it's hard? Look, they just do it like this. What do you mean? It's not so hard. Everybody else could do it. Toughen up or whatever. Blah, blah, blah. You get reprimanded. Okay, back into the point. Avol tzaddik, but the tzaddik, nigra eved Hashem, b'shem atayar. Kamei shem chacham or melech. The tzaddik is called the servant of Hashem, not the server of Hashem. So here, the Alter Rebbe, now you see why some of the people got, hey, harumph. This seems, you're saying that the Beinoni is more profoundly in service of Hashem than the tzaddik. Could be. But I thought I'm, the greatest aspiration is to be the guy who doesn't have to work so hard. Right? The greatest aspiration is to be the guy that it's so natural for him. Lucky me. Well, right, lucky you, but you didn't do it. The goal is to outpace the inevitable. What is the value add that you have brought to the world? What have you given to the world? So it's like being tall. It may be an advantage, but it's not an accomplishment. What have you done to add to the world? Now, curiously, if you look back in the pasuk that's on the top line that we started today with, I'll put it back up on the board if that makes it a little easier for everybody. If you look back at the pasuk, it says the serves God. What is the Hebrew? Oved Elokim. I hope everyone can see this. The one who serves Elokim. It's always Elokim. And here, okay, I hope everyone sees this. Oved Elokim. And here, if you look in the Tanya that we're learning now, the tzaddik is described as not Eved Elokim, but Eved Hashem. Now, again, Hashem is a euphemism, because we don't want to say God's name unnecessarily, for the name of Hashem that is spelled with the four letters, Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey. So here's a little bit of a technical point. I know this time we're trying to be more precise. The name Elohim, which sometimes is translated as Lord, whatever the English translation is the character of Hashem that creates the world. The opening line of all of Torah, Bereshis bara Elohim. In the beginning of creation, Elohim created. The name Hashem, the euphemism being for the four-letter name spelled Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey, which we don't pronounce phonetically, not because we don't know how, but because it's not a word. It is the character of God that acknowledges creation, but is beyond creation. And to illustrate that, if you think about those four letters, Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey, within those four letters is contained the three Hebrew words for tense. Past tense, Hey Yud Hey, Haya. Future, current tense, Hoveh, Hey Vav Hey. And future tense, Yihiyah, Yud Hey, Yud Hey. Now, in creation, it can't be yesterday, today, and tomorrow all at the same time. I mean, that the first thing God ever created was time. In the beginning, God creates the concept of time. And then the concept of space. I can't be here and there, right? That's the rule. If I'm here, I'm not there. If it's today, it's not yesterday. If it's now, it's not later. Okay. But Hashem is not ruled by those parameters. So whenever we see the name Elohim in Torah or anywhere, or its variants, Elokei, Elokecha, and so on, it is talking about how God is interfacing with us in our humanity. So again, creation, Bereshis bara, Elohim. That's God compressing himself into the human experience. Whenever we see the Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey, sometimes just called Hashem, or the more Kabbalistic phrase, which is a rearrangement of the letters, Havaya. I'm fine, how are you? Havaya, Hey Vav Yud Hey. It's just a euphemism. That is the level of God that acknowledges this world, but is that God is not restricted by this world, right? You people live in yesterday, today, and tomorrow. I don't. I'm God. I live today, yesterday, and tomorrow all at the same time. Now, the reason why I bring this up is the Beinoni, which is our aspiration here, is engaged in Elohim. He's engaged in this world. He lives in this world. And this world is filled with, I only react to incentive. You know, that sort of Freakonomics message that people are driven by incentive. In other words, I do stuff because it's good for me. And he's trying to overcome that. How can I overcome this mentality that I'm just doing what's good for me? So that the Beinoni is engaged in laboring with Elohim, again, with this physical world and all of its stimuli and challenges and distractions and so on and so forth. In contrast, as the Alter Rebbe says here, the tzaddik is an Eved Hashem, because the tzaddik is outside of this world. He doesn't have these temptations. He doesn't have these awareness. Well, I shouldn't say awareness is wrong. He's aware of it, just like past, present, and future, but all at the same time. Means I'm acknowledging there is a concept of past, present, and future, but I am not, God is not, the tzaddik is not beholden to this. He lives beyond that. He lives outside of that. The tzaddik is, so to speak, graduated outside of this world. These aren't matters that concern him. He's aware of them, but he's not concerned with them. So the pasuk is talking about struggling with Elohim, that is, struggling in this physical world, and how that can be superior to the tzaddik. The tzaddik is Eved Hashem. Now that phrase, Eved Hashem, is comparable to like saying this guy has achieved. He's a chacham. He's graduated. He's a melech. He's been appointed, meaning he's already a chacham or a melech. Kvar avoid v'gomer legamri. He has already completed avodas hamilchama, the battle, im hara, with the evil, to the point that it doesn't even register. Now, again, hopefully all of us can find some area in our lives that we can relate this to. So, the simplest thing, when a child is little, and you tell them one day you're not going to, I don't know, suck your thumb, play kickball. He's like, how could you imagine such a thing? What a torturous life. And then, of course, he goes through that struggle where he doesn't do it. And then one day it's like, I used to do that. It's like so unimaginable. Yeah, I can see a picture, but it's something I can't even imagine. Well, that's true with the tzaddik about all of his struggles in this world. And as we know in life, you get a next struggle. So you overcome sucking your thumb, and then you got other bad habits you got to work on, and that's what life is, and that's not a bad thing. And again, as we have emphasized, being engaged in the battle is not a sign of failure. What do I got to do or have to do anymore is not our attitude. Our attitude is this endless pursuit, even though it may be, in fact, unattainable. Whereas the tzaddik, he's already completely past that. Because he has completely chased it out, and his heart is empty within him. You remember this metaphor that the heart has two sides to it. Again, we're not here to study biology or anatomy. The heart has two sides to it. One, which is what's in it for me, and the other is what's in it for Hashem. As we've said, the animal soul says, "Is this good for me?" And the godly soul says, "Is this good for Hashem?" And the godly soul is more comfortable in the brain because it can imagine something other than itself, which is the very beginning, like the animal. You tell the animal, I'm going to feed you. The snake is punished that he's going to eat dirt. We say, what kind of punishment is that? If you eat dirt, you'll never go hungry. If we could eat dirt, we'd never have to worry about hunger. You'll never be hungry, ever. You'll never have to eat. That's a great bracha. But the answer is, so leave me alone. Here it is. Don't ever call me. So when a person is hungry, whatever hunger means, again, all different forms, we cry out to Hashem. Hashem says to the snake, look, I created you. I have a responsibility. Here it is, but don't call me. Here's $10 million, but don't ever call me. So unfortunately, in our world, people say, oh, sure, sign me up for that. But it doesn't work out so good. So here, the Alter Rebbe is saying that the tzaddik has emptied his heart. He has no challenge. His mind is already aligned with Hashem because that's the home field. That's the more comfortable place for the godly soul. But the heart, which is the more comfortable place for the animal soul, I see it, I want it, a reaction, has now chased away its enemy. That is the selfishness. So it's smooth sailing for him. Now, again, the Alter Rebbe uses an analogy that this is like titling a person who's titled as a chacham, a scholar, or a melech, a king. Now, again, nothing is random in Tanya. These two phrases represent the top to bottom of our character. We've talked about a little bit, and we'll get into it much, much more as Tanya progresses, the process of the spheros. The word spheros, like you recognize spheros ha'omer, a similar phrase, means to count. When you count things, you are identifying particulars. Sapir or sipor is to tell a story, to recount, to bring a concept to life. One of the great gifts that Kabbalah and Hasidus bring us is terms that can help us give some character to what is essentially infinite, the infinite Hashem, that we get a little character to it. So in the spheros, the most expansive, the most godlike of the spheros, by which I mean it is most infinite, is the concept of chachma. Chachma, which we translate as wisdom, but again, to pick a different word, imagination, creativity. It's the idea that I can get outside of myself. I can get beyond myself. I'm not just locked into what I see right in front of my eyes. I have the ability to think outside of myself. So it's not how many pages of Torah I know. It's the capacity to get outside of myself. Is the most godlike. Melech can also be the verb, malchus, is about the most quotidian of behaviors. It's executing. I'm going to put a stop sign here. I'm going to raise taxes. I'm going to lower interest rate. It's all those little practical things that are very particular, very not infinite looking. What is our greatest aspiration? That our chachma, our most profound ideals that go outside of myself should manifest themselves in the most ordinary. And that's the tzaddik. The tzaddik is total fluidity. There's no friction from top to bottom. And that's why we not only cherish the Torah we learn from the tzaddik and the wisdom, we cherish even the simplest way that he ties his shoes, because there's no tension between the highest and the lowest. For us, I have great conceptual aspirations. The pragmatic is where there's struggle. So to get from the resolution to be kind, thoughtful, generous, and helpful to being kind, thoughtful, and generous and helpful is not always the same. I don't always get a total one-to-one corollary. So by the Alter Rebbe choosing these two examples, that's saying that the term tzaddik is like the assigned term of chacham, scholar, or melech, king, is further referencing this frictionless, high fidelity connection between chachma, the most infinite of character traits, and malchus, the most rigid illustration or expression of my identity.